Hey guys, just here to talk about two things today that you probably all have heard of, or most of you anyways, but maybe haven't really touched much lately. The first being multiband distortion, and the second being not effect trace, Sugarbytes Wow, which is an excellent filter. I very much recommend using it. This isn't a plug for them. I just really love it. I use it all the time. And it's one of the types of things that it's very simple to use. If you want it to be simple, you can use it in more complex ways if you want. But I think it's very user-friendly, and some of the presets that are built in, the rejector preset, which is one I'm going to be talking about today, I know a lot of people use for various dubstep-y sort of vowel effects on different synths. But anyway, so the main focus though is going to be the multiband distortion, which I by no means am a pro at. Basically, I'll just play you a couple of notes from these two different synths. Actually, they're the same synth, basically just a saw wave. But one of them is just the synth itself, and the other one I have done some multiband distortion on, and then I'll talk about exactly what I did. So the first here, I use Silent for it, which I love, by the way, as a VST synth. It's just a saw wave, 8 voices. I dropped it 2 octaves. The second one over here, I don't really know why I have that on, but I do. I have another saw, I dropped it 1 octave and 2 voices. Just for the purposes of showing you some frequency things, I pulled up a spectrum analyzer, and this is what it sounds like at the moment. So you can see we're getting a peak here right around 64 hertz or so. And these are the kinds of things that you want to look for. You're going to want to throw a spectrum analyzer on your synth and just see, without having any effects, where you're getting peaks. And being that it's just a saw, you're going to get those kind of normally spaced, peaks that like exponentially get closer together as you get towards the top end here. And I did throw a compressor on there for just a kick drum that I have over on the other side. So I'll just play a clip now of that going with a kick drum, and it is sidechained to the kick. And then I will flip back and forth between this sound and the one that I did the multiband distortion, and you'll be able to tell very easily. So here's that. Okay. So it sounds, it sounds okay. And then I'll flip over. So as you can see, there's really heavy distortion on that second one, and basically the way I went about doing this in Ableton, the thing here is you have to do some routing of your audio, because you want to split your signal into its 3. You can do 2, but I would really suggest 3, because you really want a distinction between the very highest frequencies and those mid ranges, because you can actually take those high frequencies and split the signal up and widen it. And I did that with a filter delay, which I'll talk about in a different tutorial. But you want to keep the lowest end, if you're using it as a bass sound at least, you want to keep the lowest end centered. And I tend to find that the mids have very different qualities from the highs a lot of time, and so I split those into 3. So I have a low and a mid and a high. So basically I took the synth and I grouped it. So you can do that by clicking on the synth and doing Command G on a Mac. I'm not sure what it is on PC. From there, then you'll have this bus. So your synth will actually be sending the audio to this group bus, which I have some things on as well that I'll get to. And that group bus will send its audio to the master. Once you have that done, then what I did was I just clicked on the synth, right-clicked on the synth, and I inserted an audio track, which is Control-T, and I duplicated that so I had 3 of them. And then I went down, and if this portion of your settings for a given channel isn't open, then if you come down here and you click on this little I/O, which is your inputs and outputs button down here in the bottom right, that should pop up. You don't need to have your sends or return, stuff on necessarily, but that's something else entirely. So from there, I turn the audio on to sends only. So it's only sending the signal to be received by another destination, but not heard from the channel itself. And so rather than sending it to the master, which is the default, and then when you group it, it sends it to the group. Now it is just a sends only, so you're not actually getting an audible signal from it yet. And that's what these audio channels are for. And so in those channels, you're going to go to the audio from, and whatever the name of this channel is, oops, sorry about that. Whatever the name of this channel is what you're going to be getting the audio from. So in this case, I renamed it from, whatever it would have been called Silent 1, I believe, because that was the synth that I had on it. I renamed it to Main Saw, just a simple generic name. Then you find that in your drop-down menu for audio from, you'll select it. And now your audio, which is a sends only, will be sent to this audio channel. And this first one I renamed as low. And the whole point of multiband distortion, as you may know, is you're separating out the frequency ranges of your synth, and then you're working with them individually. Because when you add distortion on an audio file, if you just add it to the entire thing, you'll likely get really muddy results, especially when you crank the distortion way up. And you don't always want that. It tends to be that you have less distortion on the lower frequencies and a ton on the high frequencies. But that can vary with just what you're going for. But as you put lots of distortion on the entire signal, you're going to get weird phase. I mean, it's distortion, and generally speaking, when you have synths or just any kind of sounds, you want a clean sound. You don't want a distorted sound because it sounds bad. That's the nature of distortion. And so when your speakers, or your amp is distorting, that's generally not a sound you want. In this case, that's what we're going for, but we're going for distortion on very specific frequency ranges in very specific amounts so that it doesn't sound bad. And so, like I said, generally you want to go from low to high, with lows having the least amount of distortion, the highs having the most. So here's where a bit of EQing comes in handy. If you're not familiar with the EQing process, or you're not very good at it, you don't feel confident in it, the general principle is you're taking your low band and you are EQing out everything but the lowest frequencies. And then the mids, you're EQing out everything but the mids, and the highs, everything but the highs. Now, as you can see in my EQs, I have a significant amount of overlap. And to be honest, I'm not great at EQing, so that could just be my own stupid mistake. But I also did the overlap creates more power in those frequencies that are overlapping each other, because you're getting a double, or depending on how many different signals you have coming in, maybe a triple, or on a amount of that particular frequency. It would be the same as if I just took any other synth normally without splitting the frequencies and just duplicated it. So I had two synths, the exact same synth playing the exact same thing. It's going to give it more presence. It will also tend to cause, it can cause phasing problems or weird things like that in your mix, but here I EQ'd them very specifically so that it wasn't a problem. So on your lows, just look for those peaks when you're playing the synth, and you can accentuate those peaks if that's kind of the sound you're going for. But here, basically I just cut out everything above 300 hertz or so, and then moved on to the next one. I'll get on to the distortion. Here I EQ'd everything, pretty much below 250, and everything above, 5 kilohertz. And this one, basically you're gonna end up dropping out everything below 1,000, below 1 kilohertz. And so then from there, I went back and on my very lowest frequencies, I actually put a multiband dynamics. Now, I've done this in the past on just about every bass that I use, and this probably isn't a good way to do it, but it's just something I do. Is I'll drop a multiband distortion on the lowest frequency. So like if I have a sub bass layer, just a sine wave, I'll drop a multiband distortion on it, and I'll actually just crank up the output a little bit on the lowest frequencies, and sometimes I'll adjust this frequency range over here, but usually not. I'll just leave it stock because I'm impatient. And yeah, I just crank up the output on that, and I can actually, I'll solo just that particular channel. So I need to solo both of these. And this. Okay, I'm confused as to why my sound is going to be like that. But anyways, so this basically just kicks up that, oh, it's reverse solo. Anyways, you get the idea. So you throw on a multiband dynamics and just crank the output up on the lower frequencies. It's just going to give more presence to your bass. Then I threw an overdrive over the top of that, which I ended up turning off later because I didn't like it, where I just put the tiniest bit of overdrive on the lower frequencies of the sound. I ended up not liking it, so I took it off. So I basically did nothing to the lowest frequencies except for EQ out the mids and the highs. From there, I moved on to the mids, obviously, and I told you about the EQing already. Once again, I have the spectrum analyzer on there, but by now you probably have a feel for what you're going for. And for this, I basically just distorted the whole signal because the highs are cut off, the lows are cut off, so it doesn't really matter how far I crank that up, as long as I'm catching the mids that I want, which I was. And I distorted the whole signal. I took the dynamics down to 23% with the overdrive, and dry wet up to 100. Left the drive and tone at 50%. That's just a personal preference thing, but you can distort those mids fairly heavily. The top I just really whacked the crap out of with an amp, and I actually really like using the amp for distortion purposes, like make things like really gritty and crispy on top ends of synths. I told you I cut out the mids and lows for the most part. I left some of the mid in there, lower in the mix. And then, like I said, now this is where you get the ability to split your highest frequencies and widen that sound so that it sits wider in your headphones of your mix, or in the speakers, but you can really tell in headphones. And it gives more body to your sound overall. You might not want that. You might have other things that are sitting wide in the mix already, and the focus of your song or whatever is going to be on something else, and you don't necessarily want that synth to take up as much space. And so you might not want to do that. In this case, that's just what I did for these purposes. And so I widened that. And you can actually tell here if I take it off. So this is with it on. And you can hear that if you're listening in headphones, that sits pretty wide. If I take that off, it jumps back to the middle, and it seems less prominent. So there's that. And that's basically it for the multiband distortion. I I know I've wasted an exorbitant amount of time with this long-winded explanation that didn't really give you much insight at all, besides just an example of how I did one synth. But hopefully maybe that'll help you out a little bit. So now if I play that with you know, just a drum and with a kick drum and side chain to it, you can just kind of hear.